Hey there, Suzi here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share this special message with you. Now, my co-host Michelle and I love masterminds. Not only do we belong to masterminds, but we also host a mastermind. We started it almost 8 years ago, and it is the premier mastermind for women business owners who want to grow their business with a specific focus on marketing. Now, this group is usually completely booked out, and very occasionally we open the doors and invite a handful of women in. So if you're growing your business, but you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, or like you constantly have a split focus when it comes to your marketing, this could be exactly what you're looking for. We have an amazing time together, and the women in the group are extraordinary. They're great cheerleaders, supporters, advisors, and colleagues for you. And they're also seeing extraordinary results. We see people cracking the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, launching new e-commerce sites that go from $0 to $10,000 a month in sales. They're doubling their conversion rates, they're growing memberships, they're selling courses, they're growing their personal brands, and they're getting all kinds of media exposure and speaking opportunities and so much more. You can learn more about the mastermind and join the wait list over at herbusinessmastermind.com. We're going to open the doors soon, so you definitely want to be on the list to get an invitation. So head on over to herbusinessmastermind.com. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells Podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 205. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my fabulous co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hello, fabulous Suzi Dafnis. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
Yes, I am really, really well. I am really looking forward to today's topic because you and I know that we love this topic. It's one that underpins everything I think we do as business owners, and particularly what we do as marketers and content creators. And that is this idea of owning more space. What we mean by that is expanding into a bigger expression of yourself and your business in all the ways. Whether that's charging more for your products and services, or becoming more visible in your marketing, becoming more audacious in your messaging, offering something new that you know your market needs you to bring to the world, but maybe it feels a little bit intimidating. Owning more of your personal space and taking more downtime from your business. It can be owning more space in terms of your positioning and authority in your market. That might mean more speaking engagements or podcast interviews or media exposure or more showing up. It might also be you stepping more fully into your role as CEO in your business and getting further and further out of the weeds and the minutiae so that you can have an even bigger impact on your business. Or it can mean growing your email list or expanding the number of strategic alliances you have, or paying for advertising so that you can grow your business. All of these things and more are examples of owning more space.
They absolutely are. And this is an idea that we discussed at one of our Marketing Success Mastermind 2-day in-person meetings. And that was a few months ago that we really talked about this as a core idea of that meeting. And it's really had such a massive impact on our masterminders and the results they're getting. It's kind of been a real unleashing in many ways. And it's something we really wanted to talk about some more here on the show. And really, this idea of owning more space, it's not just a concept. It's about this idea of kind of being a fundamental orientation, the way we're oriented in our lives and in our businesses. And when it comes to the amount of space we own in any of those areas that Suzi just mentioned and any other parts of our business and wider life, there's really 3 kind of fundamental orientations we can have. We can either be maintaining the status quo, so just keeping things the way they are, shrinking back, so actually taking up less space, or expanding and owning more of the space. And we can be doing those things consciously or even unconsciously many times. So, for example, when it comes to our pricing, Suzi mentioned about owning more space when it comes to the value that we charge. We might be either shrinking back or expanding, or we may just be maintaining the status quo because we might have this conscious or unconscious belief that, hey, this is the way this has always been priced. It's the way everyone in the industry charges, so it's kind of unchangeable. Right. So I'm not going to expand here. I'm not going to own more space around my pricing. I'm just going to live with it. And it can sort of become something that we just unconsciously buy into or believe. Or we might be shrinking back from opening that second store if we have a brick and mortar store that's doing well and we're kind of feeling that pull to open the second store, but we're shrinking back from it. The owning more space urge is there, but we keep pulling back from that urge. Or we might be shrinking back from saying yes to those speaking engagements or being bolder with our messaging for a whole raft of reasons. It could be we don't feel ready, or we don't feel good enough, or we think, who wants to hear from us? Or maybe we think, this just feels too risky. I'm scared. I don't like stepping outside my comfort zone. So these can be the ways that we shrink back. And we can be expanding in all kinds of ways too. And maybe as you're listening to this, you're thinking about the ways you're shrinking back and expanding. We could be expanding by charging more, jumping in and doing our first webinar, stepping out on stage, getting more organised with our social media presence so we can expand our reach, putting together more effective marketing campaigns so we can lead people step by step through our process and getting more sales and making more money.
And all those things can feel equally exciting and terrifying at the same time, so we can have this push-pull with this idea of owning more space. And like Michelle said, this can be conscious or unconscious. It could be that we're deliberately shrinking back from something so that we can expand in other areas. This is particularly true when we're moving from being in the weeds, so in the details of our business, to becoming more of the CEO in our business, something we're always encouraging women to do. So when we're wanting to do less on the day-to-day so that we can be more strategic and take on more high-level roles that are going to give us more leverage. So we're not saying that you have to own more space in all the spaces, in all the areas of your life. It's about getting clear what spaces you want to expand into, knowing that there are some spaces where it makes more sense to maintain the status quo right now, and other spaces where it's time to shrink back from. But in the main, what we know is true, that is in many business owners, that is the case with many business owners, is that they're playing small and playing it safe when they could be expanding into much more of their potential and having a stronger business as a result of that expansion. And women will often say to me, Suzi, I want to play a bigger game. Owning more space is a pathway to that bigger game. That's why we wanted to expand the conversation about this topic here on the show, because we can give you all the tactics, all the strategies, but if at your core you're playing small and you're not finding ways to own more space where it matters most to you and your business, then those strategies, those tactics, they're ultimately not going to be as effective. Because all of those spaces you feel you want to move into, or perhaps you daydream about, maybe it's having those top-tier clients or hitting a certain financial milestone or getting invited to speak at that prestigious conference, they are all there for you to expand into.
Absolutely. I love that idea. They're all already there. They're just ready for you to expand into. I love that, Suzi. And when you think about it, growing your list, getting more followers, selling more product, having more impact, these are all expansive, taking up more space kinds of orientations. So it's kind of important, if we want to get more successful with our marketing, that we need to have that seed of expansion within us. That needs to be our orientation at our core. Otherwise, you get this push-pull thing happening that Suzi was referring to. We can be thinking we want to grow our list. We can be thinking, yeah, I want more followers. But if we are actually inside really feeling that we just want to maintain the status quo, hey, let's not rock the boat. Let's not stick our head up and be a tall poppies and get criticised, or let's not take too much risk. Or we're actually saying to ourselves subconsciously or otherwise, I want to shrink back from this, I'm afraid. Then that's actually going to be what happens. No matter how much effort you put in, there will be this element of pulling back. There'll be this sort of, you won't get the full effect and result of all of these great strategies and tactics and energy that you're putting into it. So stepping into that expansive, owning more space is really what the marketing orientation is all about. It's really at the core of what it is to be a content marketer, because through your marketing, at its core, at its essence, marketing is about owning more space with your messaging, your audience, your pricing, your brand, your profile, your network, your clients, your financial results, the impact that you're making in the world, and so much more.
Yeah, that market share, that mind share in the customer's mind. I love this. And when we first presented this concept of owning more space as the theme for our 2-day meeting at our mastermind a few months ago, because every time we meet, we have a theme, something we think is going to be the most relevant to the most number of people in the mastermind. And Michelle and I are always watching the group and thinking about what they need most right now. So when we presented this idea of owning more space, we started by showing a slide that had a small red circle in the middle of the screen, and it had the word you on it. So you can imagine a small circle in the middle of the screen with the word you in it. And then we showed that circle staying the same size to show maintaining the status quo. And then we showed it getting bigger to show expanding, and then getting smaller to show shrinking. And we invited our masterminders to share the different areas in their businesses, in their lives, where they were maintaining, shrinking, and expanding. And then we said, but here's the thing, that dot, that small circle, it's actually an illusion. That fence that you've put around yourself, that barrier to being bigger, that circle that contains you, it's an illusion. There really is no boundary. There is no circle. We are limitless beings. We have infinite potential. The expansiveness in any area of your life is already available to you and within you. And when we can have that awareness, then it really is a case of simply owning more of the space that you already have available to you, that you already have within you, that is already there, sitting there in your infinite potential. I go all goosey, Michelle.
Oh, I love it when we talk about this. It's so good. And yeah, I'm going goosey too, right? And that's why we're deliberately also using the phrase owning more space versus taking more space. And again, you know, Suzi mentioned we sort of deliberate on the theme for the mastermind. We really do. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what is the essence of what we're saying here. Because the distinction between owning more space versus taking more space, and that's sometimes a phrase that's used, or taking up more space. Here's the thing. You don't have to take anything. You don't have to snatch anything. You don't have to beg, borrow, or steal a single thing. Nothing needs to be taken from anyone else so you can be bigger. It's all, as Suzi said, already available to you, already within you. Now, we might need awareness and help and education and support to step more fully into that space that we each have, that space that we all own, to realize that circle is the illusion, that there is no circle, we're already infinite. But knowing that it's there to step into is such an important distinction. I'm not the circle. I'm beyond the circle. In fact, when you look back to what the word education means, because a lot of what we do is about helping women through education. A lot of what you're doing here, listening to this podcast, is about educating yourself and expanding yourself and really seeking to own more space. But if you go back to the etymology of the word education, you go right back to the Latin, it's about leading out from within. An educator is somebody who is actually helping people tap into what's already within them. It's not about making something incomplete complete. You're already complete. Each of us is already complete and big and magnificent.
Indeed we are. I love that. And I love that you gave the definition of education is that to educe, to pull from within to out. There's people in your industry who are owning more space perhaps than you, or there's people in your world that you admire who are owning more space. All they're doing is that they're tapping into the space that's already there for them to occupy. That is the completeness that Michelle's talking about. They're just owning it. They don't have anything more than you do. And this conversation is making me think about the amazing Katie Abbott in our mastermind, who is going through a massive expansion in her business right now. She said to us that she feels like the space was already there in her business. She just needed to step into it. And there's so much truth in what Katie said. Because we will often encourage you to dream big. And the fact that you're listening to this show right now tells me that you are committed to your learning. You've probably been to lots of courses and read lots of books and listened to lots of talks where you've been encouraged to dream big, and that can lead to some big goals, which we love. I want a 7-figure business. I want this many clients. I want that many people in my course. I want to win a big $1 corporate account. But in order for us to realize those big dreams, we need to be big, right? and you already are big. It's just about consciously finding ways to actually own that space, to be part of the expansion into the space that you want, because it's already there for yours to own. I know this is a big concept, and I really hope that this is resonating with you.
And Suzi, it can this owning more space, it can be different things at different times for different people, and we're seeing that in the mastermind right now. Different people are focusing on different parts of their business and their life to own more space in. For some people, it's about owning more downtime, actually carving out space to not be at work. For others, it's about owning more space of being seen as a real authority and thought leader in their industry. For others, it's about owning more space about the price they charge. And, for example, Suzi, a few years back when you were rebranding from the Australian Businesswomen's Network to Her Business, you were really focused on expanding your brand and your story, and you also more consciously stepped into the spotlight and owned that. That was a real moving into the space that you already occupied, but just like really owning it. And that became more of your focus as you became more front and center in your business, rather than, the person kind of holding other people up to the front and center. And to do that, other parts of your business needed to maintain the status quo, because we don't need to be expanding or owning more space in all the spaces all the time.
Right. And in some ways, I don't think we can. But, that's why when you said choosing which areas do I need to expand into. And so even though anything is possible, and I do believe we've each got so much potential within us, limitless actually, it's really about choosing what spaces we even want to own more of and when. So yes, the shift to her business was something I'd brewed on for a long time. And then it came to the point where there was undeniably, it was what I wanted to focus on owning more space around. The time was right. And it was a big initiative. In fact, we talk more about that in one of our recent episodes, episode 203, 12 questions to ask before you rebrand anything. So other things had to be put into maintenance mode while we own more space with our rebrand. For example, during that time, we focused on our branding and on a major evolution and up-leveling of our products and services. That meant new websites, a ton of new email communications, a rollout plan for all the places we needed to change over to the new Her Business branding. So we put a bunch of other things in maintenance mode, just ticking along, maintaining the status quo, things like our newsletter and this podcast and our regular meetings and our systems. We didn't do any major overhauls in other spaces and areas because we had our focus. We knew the space we were focused on owning more of was this rebrand. Since then, however, we've had other focus areas like really building up our paid traffic capabilities, meaning we've been running a lot of paid advertising on social media platforms over the last couple of years and owning more space in that area, becoming more visible. Again, this involved a major up-leveling of skill sets and mindsets around actually investing lots of dollars in traffic and systems around how ads are created and approved and all the different moving parts. And it also took expanding into having someone work with us, someone with expertise in this area, which is allowing us to own the more space because we have a partner in expanding more quickly without making all the beginner's mistakes. Because when we bring in the right who's, we can expand without having to do it all ourselves. So you can own more space without having to do it all yourself. But first, it took this orientation that Michelle spoke about. It took us having the intention to own more of that space, of showing up in ads across social platforms. The belief in our ability to play a bigger game in that area was also crucial to us owning more space there, to step into the potential we already had within us.
I think that's true. I think it's really so true what you're saying. And it can also be so challenging, right? Stepping up, playing bigger, investing money, changing our mindsets. And I just love how you lead by example with that so often, Suzi. I mean, it's not just coming onto this show and saying, here's what you got to do, and then you don't do it. I mean, you're really walking the talk.
Thanks.
And it is definitely something we need to practice. And we've got a few ways that you can practice this idea of owning more space coming up. But first, I wanted to speak to the fact that globally, we've just gone through a period of pretty unprecedented isolation, a period where the world has literally done some pretty heavy duty shrinking back, quite literally. In our houses, buildings have closed. There's been restriction in movement in a lot of ways. And it can be harder to come back out of it because in so many ways, that can feel like the new status quo. And we are incredibly adaptable as human beings. And so I just wanted to speak to this, and I found this myself. I think what happened after a couple of years of the world kind of being in a bit of retraction, a bit of like everybody going within, that I had to really deliberately own more space by expanding back out. And if that's resonating with you right now, maybe that's just something that you can meditate on. Because we are, as I said, very adaptable. And as things get smaller, we can think, oh, this is the new normal. So this episode's here to also get you thinking about that. Maybe there's been a gradual closing down and shrinking back. Maybe you couldn't have your in-person meeting and so you scaled them out. Well, maybe now's the time to get it back on the agenda. And we're here to encourage you to open yourself back up to the possibility of expansion and owning more space. And maybe it needs to look different to how it's looked before. And that's a normal, very, very normal part of owning more space. Owning more space often means evolving into newer, different versions of ourselves and our businesses. And, that's okay. That's really normal, right, Suzi?
Absolutely. And I love what you're talking about there because it can be really easy to go, well, that was 2 years of our lives. We're over it now. We're back on track. But really, are we? Are we shrinking our dreams? If our business got sidelined by the pandemic, are we willing to own more space back in the area we were, to dream bigger, to think that we can have more, to think that we can rebuild what we lost, or to originate something that's even grander and more amazing for us? That really takes, I think, a conscious willingness to own more space, to come out of this period of time. And I know for many of us we're a year out of it, but I can still feel the residue, even in myself, of having shrunken, just having the world feel like it shrunk around me, couldn't travel, could only do so many things, limitations, to really then just going, okay, the space is mine to own again. Maybe it was always there, maybe it was my own limitations, but now I can deliberately choose where I want to own more space.
Yeah, and that reset button is available to us at any time, whether it's right after a couple of years of a massive global shutdown or whether it is just that we realize we've sort of wound things down in our business or in the way we're thinking, or we've got really comfortable, like things are going great, but we're just, doing the same old, and really we're being called to own a bit more space in a certain way or to challenge ourselves in a certain way. And Suzi, you just mentioned a phrase there I want to pick up on because I do think it is a question to think on right now. As you're listening to this show, just take a moment to think about this question. How willing are you to own more space? It's just a question. Feel it in your being. Are you feeling it like a tightness in the stomach? Are you feeling it like a constriction in the chest? Or are you like getting butterflies of excitement and like a big smile on your face and thinking, yeah, heck yeah, I'm like, give it to me, baby. I'm totally ready. Or is it like a tenseness in the shoulder that's like, no, I'm resistant. I don't like this idea. I can feel that I've got comfy in my little spot. Or maybe it's something else. But just right now, become present to your own personal answer to that question. How willing am I to own more space? And it's just something to be aware of because your first job when doing a marketing campaign, and let's bring it back to, marketing because that's often what we're talking about, is being prepared to own the space. If you want to get 50 new members from your webinar, for example, then you need to be able to see that happening and own that that's possible. Not only own that it's possible, but like Katie said, know that that space is already there, that eventuality is already there. You've just got to step into it. Because any fear or doubt or not owning that makes the job just that much harder. No matter how good your marketing is or how closely you follow the awesome webinar framework or how great the copy is to promote your webinar or how good the offer was.
So important as marketers. It's a conscious decision, isn't it? Like I'm going to own more space. And we invite you to ask yourself, in addition to what Michelle just asked, is where am I maintaining the status quo? Where am I shrinking? Where am I expanding? And it's just about being aware as, beings of where these things are happening and not having it sort of happen to us. Where do I have a growth mindset right now? Where am I holding fear, or am I hiding and shrinking back? Because this personal questioning will help you identify those places where you might need to be more expansive. It might help you congratulate yourself for the space that you are owning. It might even show you where you feel ready to expand and grow.
Yeah, so good. And we don't often create that space for ourselves to even ask those questions. So I love it's kind of getting meta, isn't it? Own a bit of space so you can ask some questions of yourself so you can own some more space. But that's very much how it does go, valuing these questions and seeing how important it is. And another question to dwell on is, what are you prepared to allow? And this is something I've really worked on in my life, allowing things to happen.
Yeah.
And it really can be easy, and I think that's quite a shift when perhaps like I did. I grew up in a working class family, and I saw my parents working hard for the money, and I thought, well, it's going to be hard. I have to work really hard. I have to make this hard. But what am I prepared to allow in to this space, to expand this space that I already have this infinite possibility in? And a great example is someone Suzi and I both know.
And adore.
And, she is such a great example of fiercely owning space and being really, really kind of clean energy about it. And anyway, she couldn't make a client meeting. There was a big meeting she needed to attend in another state, and because of her schedule and when certain things were finishing, when she looked at the flights and the wait times, she just couldn't quite make it happen. She was missing out by a few hours. So this client said, well, we'll pick you up in a private plane and fly you to the meeting. And, there was a real moment where she needed to allow that expansion of what's possible. Yes, I could be the kind of person that is so valuable that my clients will fly me around in a private plane so that they can get my wisdom, that they can get the benefit of me being at a meeting that goes for a few hours. So she was prepared to allow this into her sense of what was normal, what was possible. She could own the space of someone whose clients value her enough, they'll send a private plane to get her. And not only could she allow it, what we watched her do, because we were fairly close to her going through this as she processed this, was then she owned it, baby. She owned it. She was like, yeah, this is how it's going to work. And she could see, yeah, this makes so much sense because I know the value I'm going to bring at that meeting is 10 times the cost of a plane. And it seems penny pinching to not have me there because I can't make the domestic flight. And so she owned it in herself. She owned it on social media. She took images of herself, and she also owned it in expanding her sense of her own value, and so much more came from that. It was so good.
It was such a wonderful experience to watch because I think it elevated all of us to look at, what is it that you allow? What is it that I'm willing to have? I can say that I want to own more space, but am I willing to have the space that's there, or the riches or the fame or the results or the number of clients or the bank balance? Because those two go hand in hand. We can ask, but then what will we allow? What will we allow that doesn't come with friction or hard work, as Michelle said? Someone else, I'm also someone who's grown up with a family that just worked their tails off. Things never came easy. And so being willing to allow for things to come into our lives, knowing that we've done the work, and she's an authority in her industry, she's very well respected, she's done the work. But now she can also just allow for this magic to happen where she's valued beyond how she even thought was possible, but she's so willing, as Michelle said, to own it. She's like, yeah, of course you're going to send a private jet. I'm that good.
I love it.
Because amazing things can happen, and we can then sabotage them because we don't feel like we can have them. We don't feel big enough or deserving of them. So this continuous work of owning more space is the work of being a business owner. It is the work of playing a bigger game. If you want your business to grow, you have to grow personally. Right, this is something we say all the time inside of her business, is that I know for me and probably for Michelle as well, every major shift I've had in my life, in my business, has started with a major shift in myself. And for things to change, usually first I need to change something about how I'm thinking or what I'm doing. So inside of her business, we have these 8 growth zones. And these are 8 areas of business that every successful business has working for them. And we work on each of these growth zones every single month inside of our network. Now, one of these growth zones, and I keep saying it's my favorite, is the growth zone called You. Right? So other growth zones are things like marketing and sales and products and technology and people, all the practical things that you need to run a successful business. But the You growth zone, that is about your success in business, is as much about who you're being as what you're doing. Okay, I want you to hear that again. Your success in business is as much about who you're being as it is about what you're doing. When you are owning more space, you are being bigger. You are allowing more in. You are staking your claim in the space that is already yours that you may not have claimed yet. So we mentioned a couple of practical things that you can do to practice owning more space. And I'm going to go over those again quickly for you. The first is to pick something to practice on. So what is at least one area that you'd love to own more space in over the next 90 days? Take a moment and think about it and just jot that down. I know that you might be on the road right now, but just take a moment to revisit this podcast and do this exercise. So what is at least one area that you'd like to own more space in over the next 90 days? Right? Jot that down. Get really clear about what it is. Maybe it's growing your email list. Maybe it's getting that new multi-$1,000 client. Then think about a specific target for that. So you want to be specific. So if it's, I want to grow my email list, then by how many people and by when? So maybe you want to add 500 people to your email list by 21 May. Now tune into what is happening when you make that claim. When you set that goal. Does it feel scary or challenging in terms of the space that you might need to own to have it? Because it's really hard to create these results if you're going to stay invisible. You have to own these spaces. Maybe you think, oh, I don't want to be pushy or needy, or you're worried about the budget that you might need to allocate to acquire those new leads. Just tune into all the things that might want you to instead just keep the status quo or get derailed. Now imagine that you already have it. Imagine that you're able to own having these additional 500 people on your email list in a way that was fun and felt in flow. How might that feel? What good things could come from that? Now again, if you're on the road listening to this podcast, come on back and do this exercise because it's really, really powerful. So imagine you already have it, and you're able to own having it in a way that was fun and felt in flow. Because we said earlier, we don't need to have to work hard for everything. We want to allow it and we want to own the space. Now realize you already have what it takes to get that outcome. You already own that space. It's just a matter of stepping into it and then commit to it. See it enlarging and expanding and enveloping you and your business. And also acknowledge that there may be times along the way when your concerns or fears will crop up. That is normal. It's not always easy. It's not always roses, but you already possess that thing that you want. You just have to find a way to step into it. We're being a little woo-woo today, which I know we like to be. And I encourage you, circle back, do this exercise, get into the feeling of, get into the space of owning the thing that you want to have more of, and really, really connect to that.
Because it's like you said, it's as much about, or even more so, the whole ball game really in business is about who you're being.
Right.
We think it's about what we're doing, but that is such a small part of it really. And so, yeah, we're getting woo today, and it's really deliberate. We can't believe this about who we're being and not share with you some of this, because these are the strategies that are for success. It's not just about what you put on your sales page. It's not just about how you write a good testimonial, you know, how you're showing up, how you're thinking about what you say yes to, what you allow is so fundamental to everything you're doing. So, I just want to say embrace the woo and get that first step, pick something to practice on. really feel it in your body, what it's like, what buttons it might be pushing, and also imagine what it's like when it's already done, when you already have it, and feel that excitement and feel that flow and how you might get there having fun. And know that you already have that. It's already there. You just got to step into it. So that's step one in this process that we're sharing, because we know we're getting woo, but we've still got a 3-step process. You know us.
That's right.
So the second step is, once you've done that piece of work, that internal piece of work, tell someone else what your practice experiment is. It might be a trusted colleague. It could be your goals group if you're in the Her Business Network. It could be your masterminders if you're in the mastermind. It could be your business partner, a family member, a close friend. Declaring it to somebody else is also extremely powerful. It just makes it even more real. Yeah, you know what? In the next 90 days, I'm going to do this experiment. I'm going to own more space around my email list. I'm going for gold. I'm going to get 500 people on my email list by the 21st of May, and I'm going to do it by owning more space. And I'm going to do it in a way that feels fun and that is in my full potential and flow. And I already have this outcome. I've just got to find the way to step into it.
I love that. And that declaring it to someone, that colleague, that goals group, those trusted peers, we've seen that work inside of the mastermind, because when we covered this topic a few months back and women in the mastermind started to declare where they were going to step into owning more space, and this is a theme that's continued on, what happened was their peers rallied around them, opening doors for them, showing them opportunities, cheering them on, keeping them accountable. So powerful, that point that Michelle just made. And finally, and Michelle used these words, finding your flow. How can you shift from forcing or efforting, as one of my mentors says, efforting, to allowing? The orientation that you already own this space, and it's just about getting out of the way and letting it happen. About feeling the discomfort and being comfortable with that it takes that, it's going to take some change in you to start to own more of the space that is there and available for you that you just haven't stepped into yet, and that you might just dip your toe in the water to start with, but you'll get more and more comfortable. You'll find that flow. When you can do that, when you can find that flow and shift from forcing to actually allowing, this is when business can be fun and exciting and expansive.
And who doesn't want more of that, Suzi?
Yeah, I don't know.
And this is a great way to practice this little framework that we've just shared with you, which is to pick something to practice on, get really clear about what it is, feel all the, the bits that might be coming up for you around the discomfort or any stress or fear or whatever you might feel around it, then see it really happening in reality, and then tell somebody else that you're going to do it, and then really commit to finding your flow, commit to doing it in a way that is about owning more space, not forcing, not having to take because you lack, but just knowing that you already have everything, and then it's just stepping into it. And this is such a good thing to practice. You might get part of this right and you go, right, well, I've kind of figured out a few things. Let me pick my next 90 days, or let me pick my next thing and practice it again, because it's not just a one and done. Owning more space isn't just like a declaration. I am now from henceforth going to own more space. It really is about consciously choosing and re-choosing and practicing this orientation that I'm a limitless being and that I've already got everything I need. I just need to step into the space that I already own, this boundless potential, this boundless opportunity that's around me. And it is something that you just keep choosing day in and day out. It's about really the person behind the marketer. We often are talking to the marketer on this show, but there's a person behind the marketer, and that person is determining the results the marketer gets.
Absolutely. Because we can give you all the tactics, all the strategies, all the checklists, all those things. And it also takes that person behind the marketer, the person who's actually listening to this show, to step up into being the person who can have the successful business, who can have the large email list, who can have those top-tier clients, who can have all those things. And we, Michelle and I, we want you to have it all, whatever your heart desires, the business and life that you love, the lifestyle that you're working so hard to achieve. And so we want to grant you the encouragement to really own more space. Really own more space. And speaking of owning more space, we would love it if you would help us to own a little more space in the ears of women business owners around the world with this podcast. And the way that you can do that is by leaving a rating or review for us over on Apple Podcasts. We love to share these tips with business owners, whether it's, how to create a checklist to find your ideal client, or whether it is a big topic like today on how to own more space. So we would love it if you would leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. We have over 100 5-star ratings and reviews. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would love it if you would leave a message across on Apple Podcasts. It's the big daddy of all the podcast channels. One person who recently left us a lovely note is Liz Van Vliet of My EA Career. Now, she was listening to a recent episode which has turned out to be a really popular one. It was episode 195 called Stacking Momentum with Your Annual Marketing. And Liz said this. She said, "Such a brilliant episode, Suzi and Michelle. Looking forward to being able to order my yearly planner now and get into it." So she was ordering her yearly planner from her business. She'd been listening to how to stack her momentum with her annual marketing plan, and she was ready to go for it. Now, Liz has a business called My EA Career. EA is an executive assistant, and she helps exactly that who. She helps executive assistants be perceived as indispensable. And she does that by developing their strategic thinking and their leadership skills and their other skills so that they become someone who's such a linchpin within their organisation. So thank you, Liz, for the shout out. Thank you for all the great work you do supporting women and men in their EA positions to become indispensable. Now, we have mentioned a few resources and episodes on today's show, and as always, we like it to make it easy for you to access all those goodies. Anything that we've mentioned here in the show can be found in today's show notes, which you'll find over at herbusiness.com/owning space, all one word, herbusiness.com/owning space. Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next episode? I think we're getting back to practical.
We're going back to tactical, practical, baby.
Practical.
We've had a couple of episodes where we've zoomed up and really looked at the person behind the marketer that's driving all of this. And now we're going to get really into the heartland of marketing. We're going to be talking about the elements of a sales page. Now, my prediction is I think this is going to become one of those episodes like our elements of an offer page and our webinars that sell episodes, which are super, super popular, because we are literally giving you the checklist of these 16 things you need to include in a highly successful, high converting sales page. And Suzi, sales pages are things that we often see some pretty terrible ones and a lot of the vital things missing. So I'm really keen to get this episode out to as many people as possible.
I agree, Michelle. I think it's going to be one of those runaway successes as far as how popular the episode is. And as you said, we're going to go into 16 things that you need to include. And these are 16 things that any successful high converting sales page has. So you definitely want to grab that. That is 2 weeks from the release of this episode. And if you don't already subscribe to the show, you want to make sure you click that subscribe button so that episode drops into your feed as soon as it's available. Michelle, what would you like to say before we go today?
I've loved getting a bit woo-woo with you today, Suzi. And I really do think it's so important that we remember we are these big beings, because business can keep us sometimes, knocks us around. We can feel small, or we can that one client statement or that one team member who left us and, even after we've done everything for them, or all the things that can help us to feel grumble. I hope this episode is just brought you back to your bigness, your limitless potential, your magnificence. And we see that in you, and we just want to see more of that in the world.
I want to thank you so much for listening. We love doing this show for you. And here's to owning more space. We'll see you back in the next episode of the Content Sells Podcast. Bye for now.